flower folks, welcome to Sheer Inspirations. My name is Sheer and I'm a botanist and a horticulturist, founder of Sheer Inspirations, located in Southern California, high desert zone 8B 9A borderline. In today's video, I wanted to give you a tour of my English cottage cutting garden, which I grow in the heart of Mojave Desert. I garden only on 1,500 square feet of space. This garden is 3 years old. The water source of this garden is partially sprinklers and partially drip line, only because the drip line was easier to install where the shade mulberry tree is, and the sprinklers were already pre-existing. So the garden is 8 to 10 hours of full sun in half of the garden, and the rest of it is about 4 to 6 hours of understory. In the winter time it gets less harsh sun, but in the summertime the days are longer, so it gets more sun. And all of this that you see here, it mostly came from seed. A ton of sweet williams that you're seeing here, they all came from seed. I have daffodils, tulips, and hyacinths in the same bed along with Dutch irises. They bloom, they go, and their ugly foliage when they're dying is hidden by the foxgloves and the Rebecca, the black-eyed Susans, and the sweet williams. So the way this bed I have designed is something is constantly blooming throughout the growing season, which is end of May all the way till beginning of November for me. Your growing season is going to be from your last frost till your first frost, and you want to figure that out depending on what zone you're in, and according to the USDA maps, and it will tell you what your growing season is. You can also do a search for weather patterns last year, and it will share you'll have the ability to tell when was the last frost, meaning when was the temperature going below 32, when was the last time it did that for you in April, May. Usually that's when the last frost is, and the first frost is when the season ends, which happens usually around October, November time frame for us here in the United States. There are some frost-free zones as well that grow a ton of things that are tropical that grow year-round. However, I am in a milder zone. There is still frost, but I can still grow year-round. I personally have a ton of foxglove foliage, foxglove flowers, and hollyhocks, the nostalgic English garden style plants that I love so much. You do have to be careful though where you're allowing them to spread. If you don't want them to spread, you can just go ahead and collect the seed. I personally enjoy my garden to be compactly packed with plants, and you are not seeing much of soil. The reason for this is they protect one another from the heat, and plus I don't have to weed as much because the weeds don't have a chance to grow on bare land. If you space the plants, you will notice that in that space, unless there's mulch or unless there's something that is holding the weeds from coming up, there's going to be weeds regardless. This way you have less weeds and more garden in a small space. I started this about 3.5 years ago when we acquired this house, and there wasn't anything in this house as far as gardening things were concerned. All these flowers that you see here are all grown from seed or purchased bare root or exchanged at a plant trade or via mail, and I'll leave a link as to how I did that. There is a way of building your soil for free, which is usually the very big question, is like you have to have good soil to grow all this stuff in the heart of a desert or really bad weather per se. And I don't live in a very plant-friendly climate, but this is something that I have learned, that if my soil is healthy and my plants are grandfathered in, a few years later they turn in beautiful, healthy, lush forest type plants. And even though I have heat that is going above 103, 107 for 3 months in a row, the plants continue to produce for me. So if you are struggling with the heat or humidity, the first things that you want to do is make sure that your soil is healthy. I'm somebody who's a very, very frugal gardener, and my soil is built from scratch with no money at all. I will leave a link as to how I did that from waste, from kitchen waste. Super easy to do. Takes a little bit of time, but totally worth it. That's how I built my soil. When I came here, there was sandy, a little bit of clay, sand type of soil. Now my soil is very healthy, nice, bloomy, and everything that I want to grow here grows here very well. This video was filmed over a period of 3 weeks to showcase all things the garden is doing in the heart of spring. Once the daffodils and the hyacinths are done blooming, I started filming my sweet williams and calendulas and foxgloves and hollyhocks coming up, and I would film right before I would harvest the flowers to showcase how it's changing colors, how it's constantly changing. The thing about cottage gardening is that it is something that is going to look different every year, and you can't just build a cottage garden by buying a bunch of plants, because there's they're not going to look the same, because perennials is going to be a while before they get established. Like a rose bush, it would take about 5 to 10 years for the rose bush to produce enough flowers for you to harvest loads and loads of. If you are growing from seed, that plant is now going to die at the end of the season or self-seed, and you want a little bit of randomness in this style of gardening, because it doesn't look the same every year and you don't want it to look the same. This is not a formal style of gardening. The history of cottage gardens was back when, in the Victory days, they started compactly planting vegetables, and then as time went on, it just turned into a full-on ornamental plants only. And English inspired gardens even today are very famous, just as a garden growing, or in my case I have a cutting garden. So it's an English style cottage cutting garden that I'm constantly harvesting from. As you see here, I have all of your favorites of flowers. I have roses, sweet williams, and irises, hollyhocks, foxgloves, daffodils and tulips and hyacinths are done blooming, so that's the ugly foliage that you see dying. But that's how you utilize small space and grow a ton of stuff in, and different things come up different times of the year. And since I mentioned I'm only gardening on 1,500 square feet, most of my garden is understory, under a pine tree and a fruitless mulberry tree. So a little bit of shade is provided from the desert heat, and some parts of the garden is full sun, meaning it's 8 to 10 hours of sun, and I can grow a ton of vegetables and annuals if I wanted to in that area. This is a blue sea holly that I added in the garden about 2 years ago, in 2019, I want to say. It's about 1.5 years ago, and it didn't flower, and I bought bare root of, and it's starting to flower now. This is American Beauty Berry. There's 2 plants of this that is doing great. I started this in 2019 as well. It came up, didn't really flower, did its thing, but this year it's coming back twice fold. I don't think it's going to flower this year either, because it's going to continue to invest its energy in growing. Here we have a Shasta daisy that I grew from seed, along with the irises. These are Louisiana irises. They do very well here. I was told when I first wanted to grow them that they wouldn't grow in the desert because they need a wet soil. I personally have them in partial shade. They only get about 4 to 6 hours of sun, and they do wonderful. Along with the calendula. Calendula has multiple uses. You can use them in medicines as well as cut flowers. I have my dahlias, Parma dahlias, that are now coming up in the beds that had daffodils and tulips So the daffodils and tulips are down, and the dahlias are now coming up. So this way there's something constantly growing without competition with one another. So in a small space there's a ton of stuff. I also have this weed type of fountain grass or ornamental grass. I leave it be because I use those spikes in my bouquets. Here is a Hawaiian ginger along with the gladiolas that are coming up, and this is all in the same bed when the daffodils and hyacinths and tulips are going down. All of these other perennials are now coming up because they die down with the first frost. And I have a ton of stuff in all these beds. I have this yucca here. This is a chrysanthemum in front of the yucca. And I have the flowering quince that is now about almost 1.5 years old. I grew from bare root, and I'll leave a link to that video when I was planting it. I didn't think much of it, but it's doing great. It continues to grow year round. It is a slow grower, but it's not coming to a halt at any point. I have a Virginia back there. Those flower around February time frame for me, and they remain evergreen year round. And then moving on to the irises, the comfrey that you see here, the Creopsis that has self-seeded itself right next to the comfrey. I have a foxglove that came from a Dollar Tree wildflower mix that I put down. I have a Shasta daisy about ready to open there. Then I have another irises and hollyhocks back there along with a rose. This is a pink hollyhock that has been here a few years, and it's continuing on. And hollyhocks are actually supposed to be a biennial, but in my experience they aren't. They actually flower the first year and don't die the second year, so they are not a true biennial. Maybe a short-lived perennial, but I'm not sure how long that short-lived is. 5 years, 10 years, we don't know yet, so we'll have to see. I also have some Sweet Williams, and I have some tube roses that are going to be coming up in the same bed as well, along with Queen of the Prairie, as well as a hydrangea that's over there in the corner, along with some irises and so on. And hydrangea dies down completely to the ground because it's a baby plant. One of my plant friends sent that to me, and it dies down to the ground. I thought that it was gone. She grew those from cutting, and they came up again, started growing again. So I'm a few years out. This is the hydrangea I'm talking about. And I have 3-4 different kinds of hydrangea. There's one called Oregon Pride. I believe this one is it. And I'm probably about 5-6 years out of ever seeing a flower, perhaps, but it's still growing in partial shade, about 2 hours of sun, and that's it. Here's another hollyhock. This is a white one with a salmon inside. I have a ton of yarrow here. This is a Levatira. Mellow is a common name. It's the first couple of flowers. I'm not harvesting these because I'm wanting to collect seed from it and continue to grow these 4 cut flowers. The seeds that are going to get grandfathered in are going to be much stronger than the original seeds that came out of a packet. Here are some bearded irises along with some green-eyed Susans right in front. This is the green-eyed Susan plants that were very tiny about 2 years ago. I added in October of 18. And they haven't flowered yet, but are looking very healthy this year. This is all yellow, pink, and red yarrow. I love growing yarrow. It spreads, and I love to cut it and use it in salves and whatnot. This is where I'm showing you a Tropicana canna that is starting to come up. And look at that beautiful color of foliage. I love it. I also have Maximilian sunflowers. I'll leave a link as to how to pinch those, because those need to be pinched in order for you to have a long, big harvest. I have hollyhocks here again. I have a patch of gladiolas that I got out of my greenhouse because they didn't like the partial shade they were in. They wanted full sun, so I have them right next to my fragrant rose bush, and they seem to be enjoying themselves. This is a super fragrant rose here that is purple, and it smells delicious. Back there I have a peony, a small peony plant. This is a pink yarrow, and right next to the pink yarrow is where the peony plant is towards the left hand side, and I'll show you here that in a minute, right along with the irises. These are all different colors of irises. This is a penstemon that I recently added. Baz life is about 3 to 5 days. and it's loving the full sun. That is the peony that I was talking about. If you live in warmer climates, Sarah Bernhardt peonies do very well in warmer climates. This is the little patch of annuals that I grow here. I have larkspur and tomatoes and a pepper plant that is growing. Once the larkspur is done, I'm going to put in sunflowers in here. But since the larkspur is just starting to flower, they're not getting ready to be pulled just yet. Here's a tomato plant that I'm going to be self-pollinating soon, plus a pepper plant and so on. Behind that is a primrose that came out of a wildflower mix, along with a fragrant pink and white floribunda kind of rose. And back there is more irises, bearded irises, and I have a phlox here, blue tallboy phlox that you see right there, along with celery that's growing in the back and that's getting ready to be harvested as well. I have some garlic that has been companion planted with the roses, and I will be harvesting this garlic soon. And this is where all the garlic is, as you see here. In about 15 days, 15 to 20 days, it will be getting ready to be harvested. So companion planting roses with garlic, I have found that the roses actually do smell much nicer than they did before, so it's much more potent. Here is my cilantro that's starting to bolt because of the heat. This is where the anemone used to be, and because it's heating up, the anemone is done for the season. This is the white floribunda rose that is super fragrant and flowers abundantly, as you can see, and I harvest loads and loads of these. I have a self-seeded creopsis from last year with a ladybug on it, and I love seeing these guys because they take care of all the aphids and it's amazing. I also have this false speria that comes up every year and is loving the weather right now. I have this short variety of Sweet Williams. This is a ground cover type. This is a sentimental rose. It smells really nice. Doesn't have a much long vase life except two days, and that's it. I have a jasmine plant in a container. The reason why it's in a container is I'm wanting to purchase Talavera pots and put them in there, and I'm going to put them in the backyard. Inside of a Talavera pot and so on. So I don't want to plant them in the ground. They need to be in the backyard so I can smell them inside of the house when I open up the windows. Here's another Virginia that I planted along with the dahlias, and these are optical illusion dahlias that are now coming up, and right in front of it was the ranunculus that is done for the season. This is my maroon hollyhock that is doing wonderfully, starting to open up. I will be harvesting some for bouquets once it's 3/4 of the way open. And this is about a 3-year-old plant. I have a Tropicana rose. This is a tea rose, 1 rose on per stem, a few buds on it. Very excited. I've already harvested 1 flower for Mother's Day. That is a calla lily, a white one, the giant calla lily. They seem to be loving the weather. Haven't seen any flowers yet, but they seem to like the weather once it's starting to warm up, but they don't like it too hot. This is the pink hollyhock, and as you see here, they're open more, and I'm going to be harvesting some in about a few days once they're open more, so the buds can continue to open in the vase. Beautiful color ones, beautiful red pink color when they open. As time goes on, they turn into a lighter pink, which I love. I have a hellebore in the back there, and in all of this is partial shade, about 6 to 8 hours of sun that it's getting, hence why these hollyhocks are so tall and so happy and healthy. This is a center garden. This garden I struggled with because I wasn't sure what is going to grow here because of the shade in the summer and full sun in the winter time. So I grew some Queen Anne's lace here. This is the variety that is super invasive, so if you live in an area where you feel that it's just going to take over, be careful when planting these. I live in the desert. This area gets about 4 to 6 hours of sun in the summertime, and in the wintertime it gets about 6 hours for sure sun because all of the leaves from the mulberry tree droop, and not droop but drop, and this gets more sun. So I've planted Dutch irises and Queen Anne's lace right next to one another, so they can one can flower first and then the second one goes, and so on. This is a true biennial. It doesn't flower the first year. Right next to that I had the butterfly bush. This is a stargazer lily that I had added last year. It didn't flower last year, hoping this would flower this year. Sometimes the bulbs, it takes them a few years to actually flower. Then I have the Queen Anne's lace that I added here as well because it was doing so good on the other side. I also have a lungwort. This is a lungwort plant that's been added here about a year ago. It actually flowered and is now dropping seed. I do want this plant to spread because this is one of the first plants to flower when the season begins. So I'm happy to have more of this. I also have a phlox that's growing back there on the right hand side. I have a hydrangea, two different kinds of hydrangea here. This is one right here, and then there's another one. And because of the shady location, mostly shady location, these hydrangeas do very well. I thought they were dead, but they aren't. This is a autumn, not an autumn joy sedum, but a mauve sedum, and makes great cut flowers. This is the other hydrangea that I was talking about, doing great, came up on its own, and that's the phlox back there, along with some wildflowers that self-seeded themselves from last year. I have some crocosmia. All these smaller leaves that you're seeing here is all crocosmia, and back there is the Indian chief bearded irises. These have not flowered yet. I believe that they're not getting enough sun. So perhaps next year, if they don't flower, I will move them to a different location. This is a larkspur that self-seeded itself last year, and as you can see, it's growing taller and beautifully, along with the alyssum and crocosmia. Now this bed is empty when there's no crocosmia, so I want to find something that can grow in the wintertime that is a annual, so the room is not bare. Then I have the evening primrose. This is a great herb. However, they produce a ton of seed and just go everywhere. Pollinators love these. I personally think I'm going to remove them. They are slightly fragrant, but they don't make good cut flowers. I'm going to remove these and plant something else in here probably next year once this is done, harvesting seeds and pulling up plants. Here is more of my Indian chief irises that haven't flowered for me, and they've been in here for about a year and a half, so I'm hoping that they will flower this year. If they don't, then I will need to move them to a more sunny location. I then have more of the Shasta daisies, the white daisies here in the corner, along with the gay feathers, which is also called I believe blazing star, and I also have amaryllis, the I believe it's called magic lily as well. They haven't flowered for me since the 3 years that they've been in here. Perhaps it's not liking the location, so I would need to change that. This is a new addition that I have added into my garden. This is a tea tree bush and makes a great long-lasting cut flower. And I added it this year, and it's done for the season. However, it's going to continue on and come next year it's going to flower. And this is a sweet broom, and this is a plant that's known to be very invasive. So if you are growing them out in the wild or whatnot, this has a very bad reputation of taking over. Because I'm growing it in an area that I struggle with, I'm hoping that it would make its space and hopefully do good, and I can harvest some fragrant flowers from it. Here I have a gardenia that has been here for the last 3 years. Hasn't flowered ever since it's been in here, but it's not dying either. And it's usually gets about 2 to 3 hours of sun, and that's it. But haven't seen any flowers. This is a gerbera daisy, an orange variety that one of my plant friends sent me, and it flowered once. It gave me one flower, and that's it, but it's growing, so I'm very happy about that. This is bee balm that you're seeing here, along with some dandelions. I have some of the irises. There's a black iris in here. There are some mini bearded irises in here, a dark blue variety, and I have some of the Elstromeria Peruvian lily that's starting to come up again. And I have 3 different varieties that come up. I haven't seen any flowers except the first year because the plants were so little. Personally, I think I grew the wrong type of variety. I grew the cold hardy variety instead of the heat resistant variety because I'm finding that they are not liking the heat that my desert here gets. So perhaps I would want to get some that are heat tolerant, kind of like the peonies. You know, when we grow peonies, we want to make sure that we're getting heat tolerant ones if you are in warmer climates. If you're in cooler climates, you can grow pretty much all of the peonies, and that's fine. Here I have 2 separate kinds of hosta varieties. These make great foliage plants lasting anywhere from 7 to 10 days in just water. I also have columbine back there in 3 different colors, and I think I planted them a little too close to the tree. That's why they struggle a little bit. Perhaps I want to move them into a different location where they get shade but grow a little bit happier. And these do make great cut flowers lasting anywhere from 3 to 5 days depending on when they were harvested. This was my garden tour, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video and it added value into your cut flower gardening journey, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!